Hello everybody, this is the SQL/Cycle kubeadm office hours. Today is the 17th of July. Please add your agenda to the list of agenda items and your name to the list of participants. So the first item I added, let me share my screen. Basically, this affects kubeadm, and kind, I guess. So recently a conformance test was promoted, a test in the suite was promoted to conformance, but now it requires the metric server as a dependency. So basically the horizontal pot auto-scaling, to my understanding, has to report the errors it has to a metric system. And it's technically pluggable to any metric system, but apparently the test requires the metric server. So if kubeadm wants to run this conformance test, we have to enable the metric server as an add-on. And my immediate reaction was like, we are not going to do it. And also another problem here is that the metric server is still under Kubernetes incubator. So it's not even first class yet.
I think we should revert the test.
Do you want me to assign you to this, PR? It's already merged.
Let me comment and talk with people. It looks like Clayton. I was not on the chain here.
So there was a discussion on Slack, and Clayton and Dims were pushing for this, and also I guess Soli Ross from Google. And
yeah, but this basically means that in order for a person to pass the tests, they have to install and run the metric server, which is an incubating project, which is not even part of a release artifacts that people can, they'd have to get it separately.
Yes, it's a non-essential add-on.
Exactly, right? So like it needs to be an essential add-on in order for it to actually be part of the Kubernetes release, for it to be conformance.
Yeah. Ben the Other found this problem that it's still in incubator. I basically added the comment that in my opinion, instead of reporting to the metric server, we should create a mock/test system that the test reports to that emulates the metric server possibly. And then it can be conformance, but requiring the add-on seems quite aggressive in terms of what add-ons the people install.
I agree with Lubomir. We should not require a specific implementation. Like we have the resource metric API, so we could have a mock or something that doesn't tie the metric server to conformance.
Yeah, so if more people want to comment here, please do. Clayton on Slack mentioned that he expects a deployment of Kubernetes to always install the metric server. I think this might be true for products in a corporate environment, but for users, clusters that want to be conformant, I don't think this is always the case. So there's a bit of a gap here. So maybe we can create an issue and basically request a revert for this.
Does this mean that any setup that uses other things than metric servers as resource metric implementation is non-conformant?
No, to my understanding, it's pluggable. So the system is going to detect for you that you have another metric system, and it's going to be conformant. But this particular test is using the, I'm sorry, I don't understand exactly the details. I just found about this today. So maybe these are questions that we should be asking too.
So I've got long-standing opinions that the versions of the APIs that we created internally were done under duress, and that there are better ways to even do auto-scaling than using the metrics conversion, using the tools that were built into the main API. So like we never had a discussion because HPA was in alpha forever, right? Like it was in alpha and beta for such a long time that we never had the discussion about whether or not this should be a V1. I think it was promoted to be V1 by people in absentia. And I need to go to conformance. I missed the conformance meeting this week, which I now regret because it was a day-long meeting. And now I need to follow up with folks on this. I absolutely think it should be reverted.
Do you want me to log a ticket in KK for this?
Yes, please.
Okay.
And assign it to me, please.
Okay. I'm also architecturally, I'm interested. Why should HPA report to metrics, to a metric system, and can it report to something else? Like why is this requirement present?
Oh my gosh, this is a long story. I don't know if we can do that in good nature right now, because it's a long story that would require too much background. It was part of because there was originally a deployment of Heapster, which had that separately, and then they scooped out the functionality into a metric server because there were so many implementations of metrics that they needed an abstraction layer behind that, right?
Okay. Okay, I'm going to log the ticket and we can proceed to the next item by Fabrizio.
Okay, so first of all, I want to make a proposal for making this meeting more disciplined. In part is you can blame me because discussion gets often goes in details. So I propose that we try to be a little bit more disciplined and we organize the meeting in 3 moments. The first moment is to welcome a new contributor, which is always nice. The second is to dedicate the first half of the meeting to actionable things, status update, PSA, or a request for execution, trying to keeping topic time boxed. And then we dedicate the second part of the last part of the meeting for doing alternative backlog grooming or deep dive on some specific topic. Opinions?
It sounds good to me.
Yeah, the first half is kind of tricky. I think that we should always come up with an action item if there is something on the agenda, even if it's postponed to the next meeting. But there should be some sort of an action because just discussion is difficult to do. And what I mean is that we should be making more good decisions. Like we should vote, we should do things like that to move the project forward faster. For instance, last time we didn't make any good decisions in terms of the implementation for the reconf of the cluster. We only made some decisions about documenting stuff. But yeah, this part is very tricky, the first half you're proposing. But I'm overall I'm +1 for this. And we always forget to welcome new people. So maybe after we discuss this, we can have this opportunity.
Okay, other opinions?
My opinion is that we should probably stick to the first half of the meeting and make the whole meeting the first half. And the second half can be actually scheduled on separate meetings and we actually need to do grooming and deep dives.
Makes sense. Alternative or separated Meetings.
I agree with Ross.
One problem with the deep dive on specific topics is that the first part where we have actionable items and stuff, we always deep dive into stuff. So I guess we have to limit ourselves.
This is the idea. At the beginning, we try to go to the point and be time boxed.
And if you can't time box it, that means you don't have sufficient information to make a decision. It's not actionable.
Yes, and then you schedule a separated meeting or.
Okay.
So I'm happy that everyone feel that the same have the same background idea that we want to be more decisional. So let's try to do this in next meeting.
Okay. So with that in mind, do we have any new contributors to the call? Please present yourself and what company you work for.
Check.
Not a contributor yet, just a long-time lurker and another VMware name. My name's John. I came over from the field engineering team at Heptio.
Okay, welcome, John. What part of kubeadm are you interested in exactly?
I've actually been interested in kubeadm for a long time, but my kind of client work hasn't allowed me to regularly join calls or really contribute. But recently, I've been working a lot more with the customer around some extra pieces. You might have noticed a couple of issues I raised around etcd upgrades. So I think I'm going to be a bit more involved with etcd ADM. So I'm kind of interested in the split out of etcd work from kubeadm to etcd ADM and how that shakes out. So.
Yeah, I also got involved in ADM myself. It definitely requires more people to work on it. And hopefully one day we can have the backend in kubeadm to be part of etcd ADM. And it's a long-term goal for the project. Okay.
Yep, cool.
Anybody else? I don't think we have anybody new. Okay. Fabrizio, we have a PSA.
Yes, so a PR merged on master that changed how the image name is generated on CI buckets, and this broke our test. So it is a PSA for everyone who uses these images, and while for Kinder we already have a fix in flight. I move quickly to the next topic. We have there is a PR in flight for changing the upgrade procedure for a HA cluster, and this PR was the follow-up of a discussion started by Rafael. And basically, we have to change the order from the current order where we upgrade a control plane node and including the kubelet, and then we move to the second control plane node. But as soon as we upgrade the first kubelet, we are violating the version SKU policy. That means that we have to change the documented procedure, and we have first upgrade all the control plane instances, and then upgrade the kubelet. Only after all the API server are at the new release, we can start upgrading the kubelet on the control plane nodes.
Yes, basically, I said the PR already, like last night. I commented to the original issue as well. It's definitely possible to something bad to happen, but my question there was like, if you have multiple control planes, and basically Rafa is saying that one of the kubelets, if it's newer than the API server in the cluster, and if they are not on the same node, I think basically I don't think anything bad is going to happen, because if you connect your workers to a control plane node that is that follows the version skew, like the kubelet is not newer, everything should be fine, even if the other control plane nodes have the version skew problem. That's my understanding of this.
I don't agree, because I checked yesterday, and our kubelet is talking to the load balancer. That means that a new kubelet can be redirected to an older API server, and this can cause problems.
I think that also kubespray has a mode where they have a local proxy that proxies the request to the other API server. So we can, whenever we redirect to some kind of load balancing, it might violate our policy.
Can someone, I'm sorry, I was in the middle of being angry and fighting on Slack. Can someone succinctly summarize the upgrade scenario here that is the issue? Like in summary, the short version.
If you scroll up on the issue, there is a good comment from Rafael. Okay, this one. If you look, what we are suggesting now, team, is that you first upgrade the control plane 0, and you upgrade both API server and kubelet. When you are in this condition, what can happen? That the newer kubelet, the 115, can talk with a 114.1 API server, and this violates the version skew.
So typically the order of operations was control plane upgrade first, and then kubelet second, right? And that would even include the hosting kubelet itself. Mm-hmm. Because of the kubelet upgrade is RPM/deb upgrade.
Yes.
So it's not even part of the upgrade workflow. It's a separate step, right? So
it's a separate step, but in the last edit of the upgrade page for HA, we wrote the document in the right order. So we are doing, the document says, does control plane and kubelet on one node, and then moves to the following nodes, for the following control plane node. This is wrong.
So it's just a documentation problem then, isn't it?
It's just a documentation problem.
Okay.
Okay.
A couple of other points that I added at the bottom is that I saw discussions between Jordan Legit and Joe Betts from Google that maybe in the future the kubelet will be X+1 compared to the API server. So maybe the skew is going to change. I don't have the link. I forgot where I read this. And also yesterday I tested a kubelet that is newer than the API server, and I didn't see any failures, but I was seeing failures back in the 114 cycle when something changed, and
there's no strict guarantees. Like Jordan's got a document that he wrote up about version skew policy that outlines in detail, because that's the policy that we originally had. There's no guarantees we have on API versioning whatsoever for newer versions of kubelets to be able to talk to older versions of API server, or newer versions of kubelets to talk to older. There's no downgrade conversion in API types.
Yes, the kubelet is cannot be newer. This is still in the doc by Jordan.
Yes.
Okay, let's. So my PR is already up. Please review it. What is next?
Dual stack.
Okay, Arvinder, can you comment on dual stack?
Hi guys, just a few quick comments. The feature gate landed for dual stack. I'm working on a new PR which will basically propagate. So if the feature gate for dual stack is set at the cluster configuration level, we'll propagate it down to the individual components in Kubernetes. So I'll have that out shortly. That's all the updates I have really.
Yes. So basically, this is something that I discussed with Arvid there to create a list of tasks. First, enable the feature gate. Next step is to enable the feature gate to be passed to the components. And I mean, here we can possibly split. I guess it has to be a part of the same PR to enable, the list of seeders to be passed to the components, because currently the cluster seeder is a single string. Upstream is changing to be a list of strings. One of them is IPv4, one of them can be IPv6. And the last step was to enable tests. Now, I have a question here. Like, given we are going to release this as alpha in 1.16, hopefully, how does this relate to the future tasks? Are these going to be better? For instance, this is a pretty important field in the API server that we pass from kubeadm. And can you explain, like, what is the future of these fields? Like, are we going to add them to the beta?
That's a good question. So I think the current state is that you had a very sort of very basic PR that landed that includes like the cluster CIDR change. There's a series of PRs that are going on by different people who are going to bring in these additional changes. Whether or not they actually hit alpha, I'm not entirely sure in 1.16. But yeah, eventually all this stuff will go from alpha to beta status. But that's very much in the future. I couldn't really comment on that now.
If we see that all the important fields are not enabled for the alpha, this means that we have to disable the feature gate before the release of 1.16. Because we cannot enable an alpha feature that does not work.
But if I'm not wrong, alpha feature are disabled by default.
I mean, we should probably temporarily remove it even, because if somebody enables it, it's not going to work. Like, it's a question for us. It's a maintenance question.
Right. I think it's a long ways. I mean, it depends what you call working, right? For example, today you have something working. Like pods get 2 IP addresses, and they can actually ping each other if you set up your cluster properly. And so it really depends what's working and what's not. Services are not working today, and that stuff will trickle in. So anyone who actually turns on this feature gate really needs to know what they're doing, is what I would say. And it's not going to be fully working for a long time. And fully working, I mean, like, fully tested, everything is going great. You can try different configurations. That is, very much a long way down the road.
I think that as long as it's scoped and the scope of alpha is working, we should keep it. But like, if we do not have something like a subset of a feature that is self-contained, we should revert it.
We also have the option to just keep the feature gate and just keep in there and add a note in the description that is work in progress. I personally don't mind this. So,
like, if we have pod-to-pod communication that is already working, seems like a use case that is valid, and as long as it's clearly documented that there are cases that are still not working, like services and things like that.
Fabrizio, do you remember if we can add a detailed description to the feature gates?
We can add a description.
So,
which is the message, basically.
So it's a deprecation message, but we have also a message field, correct?
If I remember well, yes. I have to check.
Okay, so I think, Arvinder, I think what we should do here is basically add this extra field and like explicitly say that this is work in progress and should not be used in production, things like that.
Yeah, sounds good.
So you can basically add the message as part of the next PR that is doing the integration.
Absolutely.
But I'm also fine into continuing the work and just before release to add a message that explains the status where we are.
Yeah, sounds good as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we can do that. So next, so this is somebody brought this discussion. It was in the VMware Slack. So basically, they had a problem where they created a single node cluster with with a single control plane. They joined more workers, and they decided to create a HA cluster out of this single node cluster. But to begin with, they were not using the control plane endpoint. And this means that you don't have a certificate that is signed to use a control plane endpoint. For the serving, that's the serving cert for the API server. Basically, my proposal here is to create a section of the creating a single node cluster, a single control plane node cluster with kubeadm. The section of the document can contain a short guide how to use, mechanics like CNAME records, A records, and also etc/hosts to basically use the control plane endpoint mechanic of kubeadm so that users can very easily transition to HA from this single control plane cluster.
I agree on the idea of writing something in the single control plane document in order to make possible a transition to multi-control plane. I don't think that we are required to go much in detail. So something like a note that explain it is highly recommended to assign a CNAME or a control or a DNS name to each Kubernetes cluster can suffice.
Yeah, basically the easiest solution right now is because not everybody is running a DNS server that has CNAME support, to my understanding. I was kind of confused because Ubuntu did a lot of changes in the newer versions, and I don't know how to set up CNAME unless I install a custom DNS server. But I'm not going to go into details in CNAME and CNAME records and A records. I'm just going to mention them. But for HCD hosts, what you can do is you can create a host name that maps to the API address of the node, and then when you pass control plane endpoint to be this host instead of the IP address, the joining nodes, if they also have this in the hosts, etc hosts, they can join the cluster, and eventually you might decide to map this this host name to DNS record that you can have an alias, or you can map it to a different IP. This is like abstracting the IP address we use for control plane endpoint using a host name.
Yes, this is the point. I think that the message should be really simple. If you plan to upgrade to a multi-control plane, you should give a stable IP address or DNS name, which is different from the machine of the machine.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to work on this and set the PR in this cycle. to clarify this point because I've seen it multiple times already.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's just my point was only to keep it as simple as possible.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. I'm next. So at the end of the month, we have the first deadline of this cycle, and I tried to make up my mind what is the status of the current priorities, especially with regard to the deadline. So having all the that requires to have all the cap and all the enhancement issue in place, and so below we have we can go through the priorities. P0 was a security improvement. As far as I understand, there is no need for a cap or for an enhancement here. I'm right?
Not that I know of.
Correct. You do not need a cap for generalized improvements.
Okay, so we are okay. Clean up kubeadm dependencies. We are okay with the cap. If I remember well, we updated the cap for the API, where we are tracking all the API changes. Ross, is that right? Yes.
Yes, but it isn't merged yet. But yeah, it probably should be merged as is and just implement.
So that in flight.
Why do we have a cap for the dependency cleanup?
We don't have, this is not actually the dependency cleanup, it's the API graduation cap, and it's basically the part of it where we split out the public APIs into kubeadm.
Oh, I see, okay.
So we have to keep this in radar and make it merge before the deadline. Okay, second P1 was customizing running cluster, which last week we split out in two parts. Change a running cluster, we don't need a cap because basically we are going to document what we have and document use cases. The part that we want to focus on is advanced for customization for kubeadm, which is customized or something else. I started a cap in a Google Doc. I will share the document soon. If someone wants to pair with me in working on this, I will really appreciate.
I definitely want to review that because it's been core to some modifications that people have been wanting to make on CAPI. I'd recommend maybe soliciting people who would be end consumers of this behavior, and that includes people who are doing like custom authentication additions to default kubeadm deploys. That's CAPI people.
Okay.
SUSE also would use this.
Okay, so I will, as soon as I have a cap, if someone wants to pair with me, again, I'm happy to go into, otherwise I will write down my ideas and then we try to review, to cycle quickly on the Google Docs.
Yeah, I was just interested if you are going to go with the patch approach versus modifying the kubeadm API.
I think that in this cycle, I don't want to modify the API in this cycle. Or at least this is what we agreed.
Yes.
So this is one of the point of the cap, and my idea was to define some well-known place where the user have to store patches for at least for the first release. But we have to discuss about this. So it will be part of the cap.
Okay.
I'm going to be submitting a PR, but I'll help you with it as much as I can.
Okay.
As soon as I get the security PR in.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much. Moving on priorities, we have better support for async node and node join. This does not require caps.
Are you basing this on a ticket that is currently in the milestone?
This list is the list from the planning session. I don't know. I don't remember if there are tickets related to each item. I have to check.
Yeah, because I wrote this, but I don't remember if we have a ticket for it. I remember we have a ticket for doing.
I will check.
Yeah, well, we don't need a cap for this. So my thinking is, if something is complicated and needs a lot of discussion, then it needs a cap. Otherwise, if we are fixing potentially 10 lines of code to make something better, I don't think it needs a cap.
Yes, I agree. It's just to make a point if we are all aligned. Okay, and then we have P2 machine readable output. I remember there was a cap. I don't know in which state it is. Someone has updates on this topic?
I think that there is a PR somewhere, but I'm not sure whether it's merged. I don't think it's merged actually.
It's not merged, so it's still like in working state. Like I'm working on it. I'm going to finish it at least to some extent and ask for one more review round. As about the cap, I don't know in which state is it. Last time I looked at it, it was still not merged. So if anyone has suggestions how to proceed with it, like what is actually make it like pending, what should we do? Just say, and I'll try to do it.
Okay. So this is something that we have to put our mind on. Then there was P2 Windows support, which I don't see people from Microsoft going on with this effort. So we can.
I'd put it to P3 at best at this point. If no one from Microsoft is actually showing up to make PRs to make it better, P3 or P.
There is a PR in flight by a Microsoft developer, but it was delayed because Microsoft have licensing problems with some of their PowerShell scripts. And I was in the SIG Windows meeting yesterday. There was basically a short comment requesting review from Patrick Lang. So it's basically blocked on people and PR review at this point. And this is for the alpha. So currently we're in pre-alpha. kubeadm is ready, but the scripts that wrap kubeadm for Windows are not ready. This is the status update. So maybe this cycle, or maybe not, we are going to have an alpha. I don't have the link for the PR. It's somewhere in a strange repository. Maybe I can fetch it later.
So I think that for the end of the month, we don't. Okay, I agree. I understand that there is no work ongoing on kubeadmin. There is some work ongoing somewhere else. We don't have, but my point is, we have to do something before the end of the month or not? I guess no.
No, it's in the hands of SIG Windows at this point.
Okay.
Unless they request something from us.
Okay, so I think that it depends by Windows forks. That's it.
Yeah, just we are tracking this, but there's no action items for us at this point.
Okay. And then there is improve test coverage, which does not require caps and announcement issue. Okay. So the two critical items that we have to keep in radar is the configuration and machine readable output. Fine for me.
Okay. Since we have 20 minutes, do you want to walk the back walk? Maybe we should look at the list of active PRs instead, because
okay,
the list is shorter. All right, let me open the list of PRs. Want to go back, forward in time or backwards in time?
Up to you.
All right, let's start from the top. So this, basically the user found a bug and it's in the certificate authority in the discovery file. We already have GTM approved, but I think Yasin and Rosti found some minor problems, and the user now has to, the contributor now has to fix them. But overall, this is a viable bug fix for 1.16.
I have a question. Discovery, joining node with discovery file is something that we are not covering without test grid.
Well, we cannot cover everything. We don't have a, basically if you want to cover everything, it's an impossible test matrix. You know, how about joining a discovery file with a different CRI? It becomes impossible. But you want basically a single test, perhaps, that's what you're thinking about. Having at least a single test that performs join with discovery file. Do we support that in Kinder? No, I guess not.
I guess not, but we can support it. So the question is this join discovered? Is join with a discovery file something that we want to have a signal on?
Maybe. To be honest, from user reports, I have not seen this as the mechanic, the common mechanic for joining. The most common mechanic I've seen is using tokens.
Okay, so let's keep this as a low. I will file an issue or look at the issue for test improvement and add this use case for test improvement with low priority.
Yes, it's very low priority. It's also not very secure, you know. You have to have a way to transition the CA to the other nodes. And having the CA to the worker nodes is not ideal.
Okay.
All right. So this PR we put a hold on that. Basically, the contributor wanted to mount certain certificate directories into the scheduler pod. But me and Nadir basically explained to him that it's not really needed. kubeadm already supports a mechanic for that using extra volumes. And adding these extra certs keys is not really required from a security standpoint. So this PR, we're probably not going to merge it. The discussion continues in the issue. So this is something that the next one, this is a discussion ongoing between, so basically the TLDR here is that we still have problems with fetching versions from the internet. My personal plan is to remove this, to make it optional, sorry. to always use the version of the kubeadm client. And then if the user wants to specify a label, we can fetch the label from the internet.
So that behavior would differ from current behavior. Like I'm not opposed to, like, if you can't reach the internet, then fall back to client, because we've already did those patches, but we apparently missed some spots.
Yes.
Because we actually had that capability for a long time, right? I think we just somehow regressed. I don't necessarily know if it. I mean, just patching the simple scenarios that we missed seems like a legitimate fix. I don't know if changing behavior is what we want for this, because we always had the capability of kubeadm to fetch from the internet the latest version, and that's kind of a user expectation now. So.
Yeah, do you have information historically why did you guys decide on this? Because it really requires internet.
This was very early in the kubeadm days. I think it had to do with the fact that you didn't want to have to go through the entire installation procedure, especially for patch renditions, to get the latest patch version. So if I have kubeadm locally installed in my environment, and a new patch version comes out, I have the ability to deploy and update fairly seamlessly without having to do a whole reinstall of the application on the host machine.
Yeah, because if the user starts with an old kubeadm binary, it's going to definitely install, using this mechanic, it's going to install a new version of the control plane, the latest patch, stable patch, which is fine, of course. But I guess they are stuck with this version. So the next patch version, they are not going to install it because the cluster is already up. I'm not arguing about this. It's just that it created such a mess with air-gapped scenarios and everything, and also we are still battling the decisions whether we should, handle 500 HTTP responses as something that should be tolerable and things like that. I agree that it's definitely a breaking change if we enable the version of the client by default. It just
I don't have strong opinions. It's more legacy than anything else. I don't mind like having an optional minus fetch latest or something like that a person can opt into, and then the default is always the client.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not opposed to that. I think the people you'd have to poke the most on, I think, would be Alexander and Lucas to verify.
Yes. Okay. I mean, this is we should patch this particular problem in this release, but I'm just I was talking about the future. Maybe I can just send a PR and assign Lucas and Alex to take a look. It was in the planning for a long time. Okay. Extract public API. Rosti, this is, I guess, proof of concept, and we should not do it for this cycle.
This is, at this point, this is not going to merge as is. So this is more for reference.
Okay. This is a dual stack. This is affecting kubeadm. I saw some of the changes. The good thing about this change is that kubeproxy is introducing v1 alpha 2, because as I said earlier, the fields, some of the fields in kubeproxy now are a slice of strings instead of regular strings. So I think we have to think about this doesn't have a milestone yet, but maybe we should start investigating, like, are we okay to transition to v1 alpha 2 in our kubeproxy deployments in kubeadm?
I think that we have a problem with this regard, because the current piece of logic that manages component config for kubeadm does not handle the upgrade from one version to another.
Yes, that's true.
I will find an issue to track this program.
I think that it may actually work automatically as long as the kinds are not changed and are exactly the same. But we still have to bump the preferred output version.
So this is going to press on us the moment V1 Alpha 1 is deprecated in kubeproxy. Because right now, I think this alpha should be supported for a while in parallel to V1 Alpha 2.
Yes, at least that's the plan from the CAP.
Yeah. It's quite unfortunate that kubeproxy is in alpha for such a long time. Yasin, do you have an update for this PR? Do you remember it?
Yeah, so the idea was to remove the dependency on libnetwork. This dependency is pulled through some functions that we're calling for kubeproxy. So like, can we use IPVS and some, I think that getting the version, kernel version and the IPVS modules. So the idea was to extract these into the utils repo, and once these are used out of tree, we can like, the idea is to see with SIG network if they can reuse these functions and implement implement these function under a staging repo. I think the kubeproxy one, although for now they're just using it for the APIs, like moving the functions there and moving and using the things that we move to util, and then us consuming these functions of under kubeproxy into kubeadm. The goal is that they should maintain this of code and provide us for like with a way to consume it. So if we are able to do this, we could get rid of some of the dependencies that are already removed in this PR.
Yeah, so I think I made a bit of a rant on Slack. And the TLDR of my rant is that it feels to me like we shouldn't be checking for IPVS on the nodes at all. And it should be the responsibility of kubeproxy to do this for us. Because we are, in kubeadm, we are integrating the part of the backend of kubeproxy for the sake of performing a validation that, you know, it should be the responsibility of the other component. And this is basically, I made this comment, I don't remember where I did it. But,
like this still gives us the ability to report back to users very early on, and like not for them, let them wait until we start deploying the cluster and kubeproxy say, hey, you cannot run IPVS.
So one way we can do it is we already have the kubeproxy image. So if kubeproxy have the utils to perform the pre-flight check, we can spawn a container with kubeproxy and possibly verify so that this check, I think it's using checking the kernel, one of the kernel files, correct?
Yeah, it's basically dependent on the kernel version. We're loading some specific IPVS modules.
Yes. Can we do this check in a container?
Short. I think yes. Basically, if it's a privileged container and it has access to check some specific files, yes.
kubeproxy has to be privileged. We cannot make it unprivileged at this point. So it's already privileged.
Okay.
That's my thinking. It should be the responsibility of the component, not of kubeadm, to perform this check. Maybe we can use kubeadm to call the component and get feedback for the state of the node.
Yeah, I agree. But like, I want this to, like, to. What I'm afraid of is it taking too much time. So I think that we could, for instance, for like first step, shift the code under a staging repo so we can consume it.
Yeah.
Does anybody know if we can put it under staging kubeproxy? Is it like only for types?
That's unclear. That's up to SIG network to decide. Basically, to my understanding, the purpose of the repository was to host not only the config but the other stuff as well. But you should really ask them. The same goes for the Kubernetes/kubelet repository under staging. Can we host kubelet utils in there? Can we host the the get hostname function that Ed was working on fixing? Like, what is the state of these repositories?
I'll try to ping SIG network and see if we can get a response from it.
Yeah, but these are small blockers that pretty much prevent kubeadm from moving out without a decision. At this point, I just propose that we should remove this check completely from kubeadm and add a release note about it and say it's a dependency complication, and maybe one day we can introduce it back in another form. That was my proposal.
I'm not strongly against it as long as we document it, I think.
Another possibility is to just get the list of kernel modules that we actually need to have loaded, because this is what actually this check is doing. It just checks whether the kernel modules are in.
Okay.
Okay, we have to end the meeting. We are at time. We did walk some of the PRs, but there are one of them. So maybe next time we can continue. All right.
Should we schedule, while we're still here, should we schedule an async grooming to go through some of the backlog and try and get 116 in working order?
Yes, we can discuss it. We can discuss on Slack. Basically, that was that's a good idea.
I'm okay with this.
All right.